Hello, my name is Andres Santa Cruz, and I will be talking about ethics in video games. The question we will be addressing in this presentation is, do video games teach ethics even if they are unintentional? To begin with the issue, each year many types of games are released, such as indie, which are games made from a small amount of developers or even by one developer, or AAA games, which are made from a large amount of developers or made from a big company. Most games usually come with a message, and the games that usually have messages are the ones with a story or that rely on players to make choices and dictate how the game goes, allowing players to feel the consequence from certain actions. However, on the other side of the coin, there are games made without messages, where they are targeted for only entertainment or violence. Not to say games with messages aren't entertaining. Certain games don't have stories and only rely on getting a score or satisfying a certain desire. Not only entertainment is a targeted thing, but pleasure as well, whether it be satisfying a fetish or sexual pleasure. We will now talk about the ethical standard video games should have. Video games are simulation of a world that is not ours. However, they shouldn't promote any real world harm, such as committing crimes or violent acts on another person. Developers should not have games that glorify or trivialize harmful actions. Things like mass murders or rape shouldn't be praised or validated. Players should not be forced to commit harmful decisions, or better yet, they should have alternatives instead of making such harmful decisions, unless the player acknowledges the action and they understand the action that they are about to commit. And developers who break these standards should be punished. Either they should have revoke permissions to create such games or any games in general, or they should be heavily fined to prevent them from making any types of games that promote any of these harmful or break this ethical standard. Begin by explaining stories in video games do have ethical lessons to be learned. Grand Theft Auto is a violent game with acts of killing, torture, and stealing. However, it teaches you that there are heavy consequences to your actions and you will be punished for them. This game does not intentionally point out the ethical um, lessons to be learned. However, as you continue to play the game, you see the main character suffer, well, multiple main characters suffer as they continue to commit such violent acts, thus uh, enforcing the idea of committing good rather than bad. Next, we have Call of Duty, or COD for short, demonstrates the acts and cruelty of war and terrorism. With things like gas attacks or bombings, they show the depth and suffering soldiers and civilians face in war. Finally, there's the game called Last of Us, which is set in a post-apocalyptic world filled with the undead. The protagonist is a husk of a person he once was, and because of that, he commits unethical acts, killing others without hesitation and not caring about others, which makes it seem like he's not human, similar to the undead that he faces. He's angry, sad, and alone, but as he goes through his journey, he regains his humanity and becomes a better person for not only to himself, but to others, as he learns the importance of being human and such. These story games are meant to simulate extreme conditions and events to show their effects, whether it be positive or negative, depending on the ethical consequences. Not only do story games have ethical lessons, but in choice-making games as well. Players are given the opportunity to make ethical decisions. In the game Red Dead Redemption 2, there is an honor system, and honor will increase or decrease depending on the ethical choices you make. Either kill a hostage or let them free, help others who are in danger, or even donating some of your money to a random stranger. BioShock is another game where decisions are made. The main major decision made is whether to either save the children who are corrupted or harvest them so you can become stronger to defeat your enemies. With these choices, they come with their respective endings, as well as how others interact with you, as they can either see you as a monster or as a savior. However, there is the argument that games do not teach any ethical lessons, especially since games are a simulated world. There are games that are designed to be violent. In the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, there was a mission called No Russian, where you are placed in an airport and is tasked to gun down civilians and escape. There is no lessons to be learned from mass killing civilians. There also exists a game called JFK Reloaded, which also allows players to try and recreate the John F. Kennedy assassination. You get rewarded in points based on how accurate you were in recreating the actual events with 3 bullets. Another game designed to be violent is a game called Super Columbine Massacre RPG, which is similar to JFK Reloaded. However, it allows you to replay and act out the events that occurred in the Columbine shooting, which is the US's worst shootings in history. It's difficult to obtain an ethical lesson from games that recreate or create violent acts, such as these games I have mentioned. And there are sometimes games where you can't just learn anything at all because they have no story or no elements that allow you to learn an ethical lesson, such as multiplayer games, which mostly rely on skill and mainly made for skills or competitions like CSGO, League of Legends, or Valorant. Not only are there games just for violence, but there are games solely made for pleasure. Visual novels is a game made for pleasure or some sort of escapism for people who mostly have no interaction with other people. Eroge is an extreme version of visual novels, as they are visual novels with sexual or erotic content. Rayplay is in eroge, where you play as a character that sexually assaults 3 women. Another similar game is called Yume Miru Kusuri, which mostly deals with students in a high school setting that has sexual content, suicide or self-harm fetishes, and drugs. Games like these are meant to be pleasure tools for players. There are also torture sandboxes, such as a game called People Playground, where you interact with human-like dolls and you can torture them with guns, explosive, or interact with them to the point where they could be mutilated and any discretion the player decides to torture them. I would like to finally express my viewpoint on this whole issue. As I've been playing video games for most of my life, and while there have been games made solely for pleasure, they are the minority. Most games teach an ethical lesson, whether it was intended or not. This begs the question, should you play unethical video games? It merely depends on your ethical standards. If you are willing to commit atrocities, kill others in a simulated world, and allow others to suffer in a simulated world, and you should know your limits as well and understand what is reality and what is simulated, and not glorify the unethical acts committed, then by all means you should go for it, because everything that happens in a simulated world is not what happens in real time. So with that, I will conclude this presentation, and I'd like to thank you for listening.